All right, Nuggets fans, welcome into Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends here at Mile High Sports. I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I am here. I am excited on this new week to kind of get into Bruce Brown, who kind of glossed over a little bit in the chaos of all of free agency. It was one of those things that everybody, when you saw it, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that's good. And then it kind of felt like, okay, understand who Bruce Brown is, understand what he's going to do. I'm not so sure that it's going to be as straightforward as a lot of people think that it is. Now, that's not to say that it's not going to be good. I think it's going to be great. And I'm very excited to watch Bruce Brown back in a Nuggets uniform. That's going to be a lot of fun for a variety of reasons. But what I am going to talk about is just what happened these last couple of years. Like Bruce Brown went to sign a 2-year, $45 million contract with the Indiana Pacers. He was then subsequently traded twice to the Toronto Raptors during that trade deadline. Actually, it was right before the trade deadline with for Pascal Siakam. And then he was moved in the next offseason by the Toronto Raptors to the New Orleans Pelicans while they were holding on to his contract, trying to use him as trade fodder, trying to use him as bait for another team to try to get the right deal. Ultimately, they did that with Brandon Ingram. Not sure if that's going to benefit them or not, but they trade Bruce Brown, and Bruce Brown's kind of gone all over. He went from Indiana to Toronto to New Orleans. And in none of those situations, he was as successful as with Denver. And that's for a variety of reasons. I'm going to get into why, at least from a statistical perspective, a little bit. But more than that, like, did his skills degrade? Was there something that he's not going to be able to do with coming to Denver? We'll talk about it. We'll see. I don't think that's going to be the case, but we're gonna find out. So, actually, let me add an image really quick that I worked on last night just to show you some of the stats that we've got going on here. Bruce Brown's production and efficiency in the last 3 seasons are what a lot of people talk about when it comes to the role that he filled for Denver and the effectiveness within that role. When he went to Indiana initially at the beginning of 2023-24, he was brought in to be a starter there. Going back and looking at some of the lineup data, it's very interesting. The 5 starters that were on that team were Tyrese Halliburton, or at least the most common lineup that he played with at the beginning. Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, Bruce Brown, Obi Toppin, and Miles Turner. Not a surprise that lineup was solid. Looking back at the lineup data, it was pretty positive. Like that's a pretty solid group. But they went from solid to a team that had championship aspirations because they got Pascal Siakam. It was a pretty straightforward reason why they did the deal. But you think back on that, and then you think about where he went to with Toronto. His most common played lineup in Toronto at the end of that year was Bruce Brown, Grady Dick, Ochai Agbaji, Scotty Barnes, Kelly Olynyk. Not a very good lineup, if I don't say so myself. And then in I have Indiana, Toronto, Indiana here. That should be New Orleans, excuse me. In New Orleans, the most commonly played lineup that he had in that particular season towards the end of that year, he was just trying to finish out the year, I think, was Jose Alvarado, Antonio Reeves, Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, and Yves Missi. So not really a surprise that lineup was not very successful, and maybe not necessarily a surprise that Bruce's numbers are not necessarily reflective of good performance. Like there's a lot of teams, I think, that were a little bit disappointed with the version of Bruce Brown that they were getting after he played such an important role for Denver. But I don't necessarily think it's his fault. I think I look at some of these situations, I look at some of the people that he played around, and I'm just not surprised that a player who is as complimentary as he is, like he can do a variety of different things. He's a slasher. He can space, but he's not really a spacer. He's a playmaking defender. He can roll to the rim. He can finish at the rim. He was doing all of those things for the Nuggets. And as you see in the stats on the screen, points, assists, rebounds, stocks per 100, like only the rebounds kind of goes towards his stints in the other couple of locations. And I think that's because he was playing more shooting guard and small forward in those places as opposed to point guard. Not as frequently a point guard in any of those particular locations. Denver was able to optimize his skill set in a lot of different ways. Going back and looking at some of the numbers under the hood is actually very interesting because you obviously hear, oh yeah, he was great. He was great. He was awesome. But why? Like what were some of those things that he was actually doing in Denver that was different than some of the lineups that he was doing, that he was a part of in Indiana, Toronto, and New Orleans? Well, in 2024, he was actually, let me go through the numbers. 2023, he was 86th he was in the 86th percentile in potential assists at his position. Off of his potential assists, teammates shot 72.5% EFG percentage, which is very, very high. Like that's extremely efficient. You want somebody that can set the table. And with Denver's system, he was in a position where his playmaking really mattered. A lot of those shots came at the rim. A lot of those were for Jokic. A lot of those were cuts. A lot of those were in transition. Some really high value opportunities that he was getting in Denver. But one of the numbers that was really important to me, 21.3% of the time he was on the ball in 2023. Ball in hand, operating the offense, as opposed to 14.9% in 2024 and 16.7% in 2025. It's not really a surprise that he had to move more off ball for Tyrese Halliburton in 2024 because Tyrese is a true point guard. He's a guy that you want the ball in his hands. With Jokic and Murray in Denver, there's a lot more flexibility there. So they allowed and kind of afforded him the opportunity to be a little bit more aggressive with the ball in his hands. And as a result, he had the 98th percentile finishing season at the rim. 98th percentile as like somebody who is 6'3". That's very impressive. In addition, it wasn't just the offense that was very good. He was 83rd percentile in shots contested at his position, and he just had strong defensive playmaking numbers across the board, whether that's steals, blocks, just getting stops, getting in the way. He was a pest. He was very, very impactful as a defensive player in 2023. And then it only kind of turned up in the playoffs where you really got to amp up the intensity, his skill set, allowing him to kind of gamble a little bit, go for different steals, go for blocks. It was very valuable. And so I'm not really surprised that he was very successful there. In 2024 with Indiana and then with Toronto, he was still a great finisher at the rim, like with the ball in his hands. He contested a lot of shots defensively, grabbed offensive rebounds, but he didn't make as many plays, and the outside shooting fell off a little bit. Like with Denver, I think he shot about 35% from three. With Indiana, with Toronto, a little bit less, kind of in that 32% range. So some of the margins look a little bit less valuable with those places. And maybe it was just because he was trying to get comfortable in a new situation. It's not like he wasn't getting good shots in Indiana. Like Tyrese Halliburton's a great playmaker. He was definitely setting the table for Bruce, but you're still trying to operate in a new system, can understand why he was a little slow. In 2025, the finishing at the rim fell off. That's one thing that you see when you look at the numbers. I'm not sure if that's an athleticism thing. I'm not sure if that is a desire, like kind of a overall level of competitiveness thing in a couple of tough situations. Toronto, of course, not very competitive at the beginning of the year. And then New Orleans, that's a horribly non-competitive situation. So not really surprised to see some of those numbers fall off. He matched some underwhelming outside shooting numbers, although those were about the same as the year before. A bit better defensive playmaking, but just not as good as Denver, and not as good as when he was at his peak performance. And so part of that is he knew exactly what his role was going to be in Denver. He was going to be the sixth man. He was going to be somebody that when Murray was out, when Porter was out, he was going to slide into that starting spot. The most common lineups that he played with Denver were with the other starters. It was the most common one was Murray, KCP, Bruce Brown at 3, Gordon, and Jokic. Now, that one's a little bit of a misnomer because KCP is just more of an off-ball player. Murray's gonna you're gonna run the Jokic Murray 2-man game, but more than that, they have the flexibility to bring Murray off the ball if they want to. And they weren't just putting Bruce in the corner and saying that's your job. They were involving him in actions. And then the next one, Bruce Brown at point guard in place of Murray, KCP, Michael Porter, Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic. Both of those lineups are great. The first one was plus 61 in 37 games. This one was plus 71 in 34 games. Both of them very valuable, impactful kind of wrinkles off of what Denver would usually do. And more than that, it was just Bruce with 4 starters. He knew exactly what he was going to get. Those guys were all competitive. They were pointed in the right direction. Everybody was on the same page. And that was a pretty reasonable expectation to have. With Indiana, they were kind of in this transition period where they were trying to figure out how to be the best version of themselves. And ultimately, that version ended up needing a guy like Pascal Siakam in Brown's place. And then in Toronto, they are still such a young team and have been each of these past 2 years trying to figure out, okay, Scotty Barnes is really good. Who else is really good? Who else are you trying to move in and get? And there've just been a team that's been in flux over the course of these past couple seasons. New Orleans was just playing out the year by the end of it this past season. So I'm not surprised that Bruce's numbers were worse in each of these places. I do think that it might be a little bit worse than people realize because Denver's evolving themselves. And more than that, I think opposing teams are going to be a little bit more ready for the kind of style of play that Denver's going to play. That's just how it works. And as Jokic has been at the peak of his career for the past 5 seasons, teams have figured out you just got to double him. So it might just come down to, is Bruce Brown going to shoot well enough? Is Christian Brown going to shoot well enough? Is Aaron Gordon going to still shoot 40+% from 3 in these situations? Can Denver create shots when Jokic is being bottled up or contained or being kind of bracketed by 2 to 3 guys? That, I think, is the question. And more than that, how is Bruce's role going to change from 2023 to now 2025-26? We'll answer that here on the other side. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Would really, really appreciate it. Okay, went through a variety of numbers. Think that those numbers are important. I'm not going to sit here and say that numbers are the be all end all, but it helps kind of quantify what you're seeing and what you're feeling back in, especially the 2022-23 season, which is now it's over 2 years removed. There are things that obviously happened that were very important. There are things that, as the NBA has continued to shift, continue to change, the Nuggets will need to continue to shift and change with it. So now you've got a different version of yourself if you are Bruce Brown, if you are the Nuggets. KCP is no longer here. Michael Porter is no longer here. Now you've got Christian Brown starting in his place, where he was playing a minor role for Denver back in 2023. And then you've got Cam Johnson, who a lot of people obviously expect to be just as good, if not better, than the role that Michael Porter played, but it's going to be slightly different. So how is that going to work? What is it going to look like? From the rotation perspective and what we've talked about, I believe that backup point guard is the primary role with this group that Brown is going to play, that Bruce is going to play. That might change. It might not be what happens throughout the entire season, but let's go through it. The starters are locked to me in Jamal Murray, Christian Brown, Cam Johnson, Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic. Denver's obviously trying to recreate a lot of what was successful in 2023. Christian Brown is a little bit more of an offensive minded player. Cam Johnson's a little bit better of a defensive fit, a little bit better of an all around fit, I think, than what Michael Porter was. And the bench guys are entirely different from where they were before. Now you don't have Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, Christian Brown as your primary guys. Zeke Naji, Flacco Chanchar, trading for Thomas Bryant and signing Reggie Jackson on the buyout market, things like that. Peyton Watson was on the roster, but he wasn't really a factor yet. Now you've got 4 guys that I think expect to have some time around Bruce Brown. You've got Julian Strother, Tim Hardaway Jr., Peyton Watson, and Jonas Valanciunas. Jonas, of course, very different style than the style that the Nuggets were playing back in 2023 with their second unit. So that will be an adjustment period. It'll be something that Denver has to figure out. The bench guys that could get some time, we're not sure whether they will. Jalen Pickett, Zeke Naji, Deron Holmes, and let's say a mysterious 15th man. Denver still has an open roster spot if they decide to fill it. I got to imagine it will be for a player that will play, or at least has a reasonable expectation of some minutes. I don't have Hunter Tyson as in that factor for playing time. I don't have Spencer Jones, Tamar Bates, Curtis Jones. They're 3 two-way players in that factor for playing time. But what I'm seeing right now from Denver's rotation, what I'm seeing right now from the mix that they have, is that Bruce just makes the most sense as a backup point guard. He makes the most sense backing up Jamal Murray. Now, what you're going to see, of course, is some staggering, whether that is Jamal playing next to Bruce Brown with the second unit, or in the lineups where, like, hypothetically, Jamal does stagger with the second unit. There's going to be a lot of lineups where Jamal doesn't play and Bruce kind of gives him a break so that Jamal can then stagger with that second group. So what I'm looking at with this, I had Bruce at a kind of 1,600 minute projection or so last week. In 2022-23, he played 2,280 minutes in about 80 games in 22-23. That's a lot. It's a lot of time. It was the, I believe, second or third most amount of minutes that any player played for the Nuggets in that championship run. KCP was up there, Jokic was up there, but that Bruce Brown number is significant. So I don't think that he's going to be expecting that level of minutes, nor do I think that Denver should be going for that. I think that they should be trying to add, whether it's Tim Hardaway Jr. or Julian Strother or Peyton Watson or whoever that is off of the bench, they should be trying to mix in some different looks and try to find some levels of trust with those other guys. Because at the end of the day in 22-23, yes, Denver got lucky with the rotation that they had with Christian Brown kind of figuring some things out by the end of it. He was a factor for Denver in the finals. Jeff Green became kind of unplayable by the end of it, and he helped them get through for most of the rounds, but was really struggling. And then Denver was really just trusting like 6.5 guys when it came to that final game in Game 5. They're like, all right, Bruce, you're rotating in with a whole bunch of the starters, and then Christian, we'll see what happens. But basically, you don't want to get to that level if you don't have to. You would like to be able to trust other people. So whether that is Bruce playing a slightly lesser role or maybe playing a slightly different role, it just wouldn't surprise me either way. So I think that 1,600 minutes, at least at the outset, is a pretty reasonable projection. And here are some lineups, here are some concepts that I like. Think back to 2023 and what worked. I have a slightly different variation on that. Jamal Murray, Bruce Brown, Cam Johnson, Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic. That doesn't include Christian Brown, and that might get a little bit weird when you're doing some staggering different lineups. But I think from a skill set perspective, this is what matches what 2023 was like the best. And the reason why I say that, Cam Johnson, a little bit more ball handling than you need or than you had previously. Aaron Gordon, a little bit better of a spacer than he was in 22-23. He was more of a rim pressure guy back in 22-23. Didn't have to really space the floor that much, although he did shoot and did shoot it pretty well. It was just on a very low volume. Bruce, I think, like you want Cam Johnson out there to kind of be that spacer, whether it's replicating what KCP did, replicating what MPJ did. Bruce can be your rim pressure guy in that case, kind of replicating what Christian Brown does with that starting unit. Another lineup I like, you move Bruce to point guard, you put back in Christian Brown, Cam Johnson, Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic. This is the lineup that you play when Jamal Murray needs a break. When you are, like, you got to kind of play this one, because if you do expect to play Jamal Murray with the second unit in the playoffs, which I think is the expectation, then Bruce has to be comfortable playing next to Christian Brown in that backcourt. They have to figure it out. The good thing is that, like, so KCP, I think, had a little bit more trust from Denver in terms of running DHO, running pick and roll at times. Christian can do some things. He's going to continue to grow into it. But in terms of shooting off the dribble, that's just not his skill set yet. It's not really Bruce Brown's skill set yet. So Denver will probably be running a lot of DHOs and pick and rolls between Cam Johnson and Nikola Jokic in that case. Could they do some stuff with Cam Johnson and Bruce Brown in that case, where Cam is handling the basketball, Bruce is running pick and roll, and he's kind of the roll man, the undersized roll man in that situation, where he gets to go finish at the rim while Jokic is on the opposite wing. He can direct some stuff. Aaron Gordon's in the corner, things like that. Maybe he's under the rim waiting for a drop off. But I like the way that Denver can mix and match their responsibilities with Bruce Brown out there, but especially Cam Johnson out there, because what Bruce was providing in 2023 was so valuable from a jack of all trades perspective that you want other players that can do a variety of different things around him too. It makes you more dangerous to guard. Like, you might not be like your A team might, or your A level set, whatever that is, your top level stuff may not be as good, but you're going to be deeper in terms of the number of things that you can run. So I think Cam Johnson will certainly help with that, but I like that duo for that reason. Cam Johnson, Bruce Brown, you have different guys that are just good at a variety of different things. So I want to see those guys play together a lot. I think that that's going to be extremely valuable for Denver, which means you kind of want Cam Johnson to stagger a little bit. Here's another lineup that I think you could go to: Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway Jr., Cam Johnson, Peyton Watson, and I have Jokic here, but you could also put Valanciunas there if you wanted to use it as a second unit. I like this group. I think that you get some of that playmaking, some of that defensive playmaking as well with Bruce Brown out there, but you can also go to those DHOs and those pick and rolls with Cam Johnson operating at the top. So, like, there's a lot of different things that Denver can do with Bruce, and that's the entire value of having him and somebody that you trust. You just put him into your system and say, you're going to run this, and he's going to be able to do it. So that'll be fun. It's going to be enjoyable. And I think the way that Denver can go to some of these different lineups is going to be really valuable. Another one: Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway Jr., Julian Strawther, Deron Holmes, Jonas Valanciunas, all bench lineup. I think that skill set stuff fits pretty well. That doesn't include Peyton Watson, though. And I think that that'll be an interesting balance to try to figure out. So here's the actual bench lineup that I think Denver's going to run: Jamal Murray staggering, Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway Jr., Peyton Watson, Jonas Valanciunas. You've got the big center operating in the middle of the floor. You've got Bruce Brown, Jamal Murray kind of sharing ball handling responsibilities. Tim Hardaway Jr. will be your spacer. Peyton Watson will be your defender, your backline defender, while Valanciunas is kind of playing a regular drop, but also can kind of play up a little bit in this particular situation. So it's going to be interesting. This is going to be a very interesting year for a variety of reasons. J.K. Walrus asks, "Is Bruce's knee all good?" To my knowledge, yes. To my knowledge, he's all good. It's just like need time, need rest, need recovery. But I'm not going to swear by anything. I think that it's important to like we'll see what it looks like going forward. By the way, Cody in the comments says, "Ryan, I hope the mountain getaway was fun." It was fun. It was nice to get away, and very excited to be back, of course. Okay, so those were some of the lineups. Those are some of the things. Will it be as good? Like just straight up, is this going to be as good of a situation for Denver as it was in 2023? We don't know. Like we can assume, we can think about it. We can try to predict some things, but overall, I think that one of the good things about getting both Bruce Brown and Tim Hardaway is that you get kind of like, ideally, if you combine those players, people have talked about this with Julian Strawther and Peyton Watson. If you combine them into one prospect, that would be like sick. Like that would be a great prospect to have. With Bruce Brown and Tim Hardaway, you combine those two skill sets together from the outside shooting, the aggressiveness from Tim Hardaway, and the overall kind of jack of all trades nature of Bruce Brown, you get a really impressive skill set there too. So I think what Denver's going to be able to do as a result is they're going to be able to mix and match. There may not be like, is one of the reasons why I don't think that 2,280 minutes is going to be on the table for Bruce this time around. I think it's going to be closer to about 1,600 like I talked about. It could be 1,500. It could be 1,700. It could be slightly more than that. But what Denver's going to have to figure out, like Jalen Pickett, I've talked about him before. I think that he could get more time than people expect. It's going to be interesting. Like it's going to be one of those things where it might involve an injury. It might involve like Jamal being out for 2 weeks, a month. Like he rolls an ankle. Bruce Brown maybe even is one of those guys that could roll an ankle himself or get a hammy or something like that. Then Jalen Pickett's probably going to play, and he might play pretty well. Like third season, veteran type point guard, veteran type skill set, not going to make a lot of mistakes. I think Adelman trusts him. That's one of the reasons why I tried him out in the playoffs. It wouldn't surprise me if Denver has another backup point guard that they can go to. And then that means Bruce Brown moving over to shooting guard, moving over to small forward, kind of trying to be a little bit more flexible. And maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. Like it just wouldn't surprise me if like there's at least a world out there where Bruce doesn't play by the end of the season because Denver's figured out some other things. It's why he's on a minimum contract. It's like he may not be their biggest priority. I think the most likely situation is that Bruce is their sixth man. Like let me reiterate that. It doesn't necessarily guarantee it though. So he's going to have to prove it. He's going to have to show Denver again that his skill set, his mentality, the veteran presence that he brings, the aggressiveness that he brings, that those things are still what Denver needs. And that's going to involve a lot of work. It's going to involve being better on the defensive end. And it's going to involve, like, you're going to need to trust him with the ball in his hands. He might make some mistakes. It might not be as awesome as you would hope. But I do think having just somebody, and I think Denver and Nuggets fans have to get comfortable with the idea of a point guard and of a player just with your second unit that could go from playing 10 minutes on a night to 25 minutes on a night to 8 minutes on a night to 16 minutes on a night. It's just going to depend on how they're playing, the matchup, the situation. And it does seem to me like David Adelman is more willing to do that than Michael Malone certainly was. I liked the consistency that Michael Malone would go to, but he was pretty rigid a lot of the time, especially when he found something that he liked that was successful. He's like, let's do that again and again and again and again and again. And that's just where most coaches go. David Adelman's going to have to battle against that. He's going to have to be a little bit more flexible because there's going to be a time, there's going to be a situation where either Denver starters don't work, or Bruce Brown doesn't work, or Julian Strother doesn't work, or Peyton Watson doesn't work, or Tim Hardaway doesn't, like whoever. There's going to be times. So you have to keep them all ready for that purpose, which means you can't overplay one guy. Bruce Brown playing the second most minutes on the team, I think would be a bad thing, personally. That might be wrong. I'm not going to sit here and swear by that, but we're just going to have to see. I do think it's important for Denver to have some flexibility, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they go from here. In the comments down below, make sure to let me know what you think Bruce Brown's role is going to be. Is it just going to be the replication of what he was doing in 2023 with Denver? Is this going to be just a happy marriage? There's no questions asked. Are you a little bit more concerned? Let me know what you think down in the comments. But now that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends here at Mile High Sports. Thank you so much for tuning into the show, folks. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on the way out. I will talk to you guys very soon.